Thank you for tuning into another episode of Turek Books, New York City, June 21st, less than a month. I'm going to be there. I'm really excited. I haven't been to New York in a long time. I'm going to bring the romance back to New York City, make New York romantic again. Anyway, I'm going on summer tour across the U.S. Check my bands in town, follow it for tour dates. Even if I'm not coming to your city, if you follow, when I do come to your city, it'll notify you because social media is not reliable. Anyway, we have a great guest today. Her name's Evgenia Kovda. We go way back as strangers, acquaintances, and now friends. And she gets into Philip K. Dick pretty in depth. And it's a really illuminating conversation. And I'm lucky to have her on. But really, get tickets to my comedy tour. Let's do this. Some of these bookers might even be in the mafia, and they're going to whack me if I don't sell more tickets. All right, you get it. Enjoy the episode. Thanks again for tuning in. Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. I'm so excited for our guest today. She's a filmmaker, a podcaster. Her Substack, The Nefarious Russians, is incredible. Her and Yasha Levine run it. They're great writers. I'm so excited to have her today. Evgenia Kovda, how are you?
Thank you. I am not bad. Or I guess if I want to pass as an American, I have to say great. How are you? How are you?
No, I didn't bring you on to be like an American, you know.
Yeah.
We gotta hear it a little more unvarnished in Russian, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what will happen? So, yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I've been a fan of your poetry and also your book podcast that I listen to occasionally, and it's it's an honor. And I think you are doing God's work really because sort of even though it seems like sort of self-evident, but to kind of focus on books in the time when no one seemed to be able to read anymore.
Yeah, thanks. It's so weird because I just live in a world of books and I'm constantly accumulating them and flipping through them and reading.
Me too.
Yeah, and so like I'm in a bubble of literacy, but then you get reminded, oh wait, not everyone is. The average American reads at a 7th or 8th grade level. And people have reached out to me and told me that my podcast and some of my posts have inspired them to read more. And that's a really cool feeling. I went on your podcast a couple weeks ago, you and Yasha. We have this really cool backstory of like frequenting the same rundown coffee shop that was open 24/7 back in Venice Beach when there was still this really cool cross section of people socioeconomically. And I almost wish people had that backstory. They don't, but that pretty much summarizes it. And so we go back a long way. Like proper Russians, we got nostalgic and sentimental. And I hope people
15 years ago almost, 15 years back, which is
wild. And it's really cool to reconnect and kind of hear multiple perspectives on those times. But yeah, I mean, you're a writer that I really admire. And so we've talked a little about books. I'm guessing you're a big reader.
Yeah, I am. And just one thing before the thought slips off my mind. The fact that I obviously discovered you, for those who are not going to listen to our podcast, that is like a long one. I rediscovered you through your TikTok kind of celebrity. And I have to say, like, it's kind of funny and great, but also sad a little bit that all of us 15 years later, version of this like avatar-like kind of hologram influencer types, even if it's intellectual, even if it's about books or writing or films or whatever, it is something to ponder. It's funny, that's how we found each other again.
That we're like existing in surreality and facsimile of relationship.
Yeah, and that's also it is a weird like economic model too. It is bizarre. But anyway, but to move
Well,
on from
no,
that, it
but
is what
no,
it
because
is.
that makes me think like, yeah, but we were just like, social media hadn't really leapt like it did at that point when we crossed paths. You would come into this fancy bakery I worked at that had really good food and in Venice. And we were all just too shy back when that's all it was. You're shy around people, you kind of notice and remark on them, and then you never see them again.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe the algorithm was like, no, not so fast. You guys have more business. So maybe the algorithms, these pathetic algorithms, are actually playing God.
There is some sort of like invisible hand thing because there is some merit in all that. I don't know, virality sometimes, right? It's not, I can't completely disregard it as some sort of like, I don't know, garbage, utter garbage. Not always. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's, and that's what I want to talk to you about books wise today. Sometimes it is like almost like some sort of light shining through. Speaking of virality and your virality, the way I see it, with your poetry and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and we were talking about infiltrating social media to like promote a human message. Yeah, and then also we moved to the other side of LA, and you would come into the bar that I worked at once in a while, and then
it is wild.
we chatted more then. So we've like had these like every 5 or 10 year, you know, yeah. Now here we are. You're right. There is something sad about the fact that we're doing this, even just through like a video conferencing app.
But it's better than nothing, you know? And again, you're right. Ultimately, I guess you used to be more that way too. And for me, definitely, maybe I'm just generally a shy person, and immigration doesn't help when you also have to operate in a second language. So it's obviously almost like can exacerbate things. So yeah,
Mm.
I felt like I wasn't, really reaching out, like connecting with many people. Sometimes it happened, and I definitely found some great American friends in the last decade. But yeah, but it was definitely quite like an effort. But it's funny, yeah, that once you moved to the east side of LA, and Yasha and me were staying in the like guest house of our musician friend right there in Echo Park. I like ran into you at that bar, and it felt like serendipitous. It's really bizarre. And you were telling me about your screenplay, and then I figured that yeah, you're an interesting poet, and I think you were writing back then already, and even had some social media presence, but it's definitely changed in the last, I don't know, 4 years, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really cool. I'm calling it cool. And
It is cool. No, it's cool, and I'm happy for you. I think it is like well deserved. I'm not being again.
oh no, I
To
was
sh-
calling it cool how we've interacted over time.
oh,
Yeah,
right, right.
the social media thing is just incidental to the day and age we're all living in, and I'm not sure what it actually means or doesn't mean, but it feels more like a casino, and you know, we're all just kind of playing this casino.
kind of, yeah. There, I guess it's can be one of the metaphors, but it's actually interesting. So, since again, I'm, I guess, very much like you, and like kind of immersed in books and often read, I don't know, more than 5 books at a time,
Hmm.
obviously like slowly and like
Yes.
flipping through, and there's a big stack always by my bed that is right behind me. And so it's probably not the most typical also relationship with books, because one thing I discovered, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it really feels that, at least in America, I don't know what it's like in Western Europe, but in comparison to Russia, the big difference I discovered is this, that people who are readers like me or you, like basically who are like immersed in the world of books, they usually the people who are basically professionally doing it. In a way, it's like part of their anyway career, like professional life. It's whether academics or book critics or some sort of literati types, which is by association it is their profession, or it's also frequently can be associated with some sort of like layabout fairly rich person kind of thing to do. It is like I'm saying all this, obviously it's not always true, but there is a general vibe, and I've been in New York and LA mostly living for like what, almost 13 years, and it's definitely like, okay, there's some truth to that. And in my experience, I don't come from any of this. And my experience with this is that you don't have to do like to be mm, like your work and your livelihood, you're like associated with literature and books to be that way. That's just kind of part of life. It's fine. It just both fun, pleasurable. I think the big thing that it's actually a lot of pleasure. And I'm kind of sad that, and I'm not condescending at all, but I'm just sad that it seems like a lot of people don't develop enough reading, I don't know what, like habits in a way, not skills. Everyone has a skill, habits to understand how pleasurable it is, how it's an encapsulated um, person's psyche in a way that you can get to know through books. Doesn't matter if it was written 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, or like 10 years ago. And it's magic, really, almost like better than drugs sometimes when I think of it. So anyways, and I'm kind of lamenting that it's some kind of like somewhat in a uh, like elite thing or elite profession. So anyway, that's
Elite and purpose driven, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I feel like I'm reading, especially nonfiction, as a means to win an argument.
Oh.
And what a horrible way to go about the process. And then,
Mhm.
I'll slip into something that is magic and pleasure. And it's just a totally different act. There's an ease, there's a fluidity, and there's a deeper interrogation ultimately of my experience as a human and our experiences. And so, yeah, I feel that. It seems like what I've heard is that reading in Russia is just more casually embedded in society, right?
I think so. And, I obviously have a fairly limited experience, and I do sort of come from like I guess like intelligentsia circles where it's like I was born into like a family or like a whole circle of like people who read. So it's obviously somewhat like I don't know, maybe not like a countrywide, totally like throughout all country phenomenon. But I do think overall, yes, it's still true and it partially connected to, it's kind of the good side of Soviet Union heritage because there's a lot of bad things. But the good thing is the culture it was an Enlightenment project for sure. At least the effort was very much part of the Enlightenment tradition and belief system. And all the culture was totally free. And there was quite a lot in comparison to Americans today, or even like a few decades ago. People had a lot of leisure time too. I think, again, in comparison to this kind of like uber capitalist American society, and that's kind of landed itself to this sort of activity. It's also cheap or free, like their libraries, right, and all that thing. And it's also, I guess, there was no internet. You can explain it was like definitely lagging in many things. So I think people were just reading, and but the leisure and also like the sort of the idea that culture, literature, art in general is for everyone. I only started appreciating that idea later and thinking, oh, why is it different here? Because it was never really fully sort of like, I think, digested despite the democratization and all those things in the 60s. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's still not fully here. It's sort of sometimes looked at as some sort of, again, I don't know, maybe it's not the best word, but sort of exquisitely like elite activity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a stigma to reading, and
Mhm.
it's deemed almost frivolous in the United
And
States.
something for your, I don't know, soul, but also for fun.
It's interesting. When I was a kid, every grocery store in the United States had a section of books. They weren't necessarily good books. They were bestsellers and like Fabio romance books that like the bored housewife who's doing the grocery shopping for the family would pick up and to transport herself to a more romantic whatever. And those evaporated. Those aren't in grocery stores anymore. So even like that, like kind of weak baseline has disappeared. It seems like there's a resurgence as
Mhm.
people understand where their mind encounter to the internet and just wanting more things physical and tangible and just feeling the difference between that and our surreal experiences. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Uh,
Yeah.
but
So
it
I
means
guess
it's
there's,
an
yeah.
untapped market for growth, and we can take this. There's a lot of money to be made, is what I'm saying.
Well, here it is. Look, you're doing it. I'm trying to do it. I'm like, oh, wait a second. All the stuff I thought costs nothing and has no practical, pragmatic, I don't know, some kind of money value. I'm like, wait, I have a lot of things I've read about. Maybe I'm gonna write about them for money.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
just yeah.
I know. Yeah, and
Anyway,
that's part of it too. The accumulation of knowledge as a means of regurgitating it for profit is like,
it's
yeah,
yeah.
it's there. Um,
It's there, and I'm not like I really think it's just not the ideal world we live in where it is the thing, you know. And I'm not
No.
proud of it, of that part of partially something what I kind of been recently doing.
Well, I
But yeah,
love
but
that as a starting off point,
Mhm.
and I want to hear about your reading life.
Yeah, okay. So I want to have, since we don't have all the time in the world, I really can talk about books forever. Because again, you know, I guess part of it also, I was like an only child. It was really like books for my friends. I don't know. I spent a lot of time alone. So it's like this is actually a pretty common story. It doesn't have to be Russia or anything. But anyway, uh, I want to have some kind of focus to the books I want to discuss with you today. And I actually kind of mostly just want to talk about one writer, American writer that I think is still a bit underappreciated for what he's done and what kind of, like, I think a prophet he's been. Speaking about logarithm, what do you call hologramic kind of existence now. It's Philip K. Dick. Uh, you, I think we briefly chatted. You do know him and you've
Yeah,
read
science
a little
fiction
bit.
writer.
Yeah.
Some of his books have been made into movies. What?
Many of his
Many of his
stories were made
books,
into movies. He actually, not just some, it's actually quite many.
like
That's
Minority
funny.
Report, is that a Philip K. Dick?
Yes, it's a kind of short story. Yeah, that's him. What is it? Got
The
Blade
Harrison
Runner.
Ford movie, yeah, Blade Runner.
Blade Runner is based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Yeah, and actually the book is much better than the movie, and I want to talk about it as well.
Yes.
But generally, I think to sort of like, it's funny that again I'm a foreigner immigrant. Why I'm the one who's gonna like prop up Philip K. Dick and give him his dues? But I've been really on this I wouldn't call it obsession, but like maybe like I don't even know, like rediscovery of his writing in the last, I don't know, maybe 5+ years. Because first I found out about him even like, I don't know, as a teenager 20 years ago in Moscow. And back then I couldn't appreciate him at all. And I do believe I actually even tried reading him in original in English because I kind of learned English early on. But the thing was, it wasn't my lack of English that made me not appreciative of him. It was more about not being ready to see beyond the sort of like almost simplistic, kind of like sometimes almost like crude plotting and crude writing and lack of this, I don't know, how to say, like it's kind of like beautiful, realistic play with language that I guess at that point was used to, which I guess I was a pretty like snotty kid. I liked like Nabokov early on, and you know things. Thomas Mann. Picking up Philip K. Dick was like, honestly, because I was like, what is this trash? I remember this because Yasha, I think, was the one. Okay, Yasha was the one who I think first like introduced me to it, and I was like, this is trash. I'm not like I'm not gonna like really read it. And so it's funny. And then fast forward like literally decades, and I'm the biggest fan. And so I have to explain why, because to me, again, as I was never this kind of like nerdy boy, that's really the average Philip K. Dick reader among teenagers, nerdy boys who into like some sort of sci-fi stuff. And they're kind of into this alternative universes that they want to do like escape into from their maybe not a very exciting social life. That's a stereotype, but sometimes it's true. And so I wasn't that. And so my appreciation is different. And I really think like Philip K. Dick, who didn't live a very long life, I think he died in his like what, mid-50s, if even. And he is really almost like a prophet of not just 20th century, for the 21st century, for the kind of like world we're inhabiting now, that wasn't really there when he was writing about it. So in a way, I guess in the very simple terms, my appreciation starts with the fact that once I started really reading or rereading a lot of the books, is like seeing the truth and all the predictions come true.
Hmm.
You know, in his writing, that was some of his best books were written in the 60s. That's how wild it is, at least for me. And I really think in some ways, I'm trying to remember who said it. It's not my line, but I don't know if Philip K. Dick maybe is like the way Kafka is the sort of a prophet for the first half of the 20th century, you know, with all the camps, and in a way he did kind of predict it, which is really weird. Termination camps in Nazi
Hmm.
Germany. And Philip K. Dick did what Kafka did for the second part of the 20th century, and I would say the first part of 21st, whatever is now. So it is like he's probably the biggest phenomena, and I think partially because of how poppy it seems on the genre he was writing in, and the fact that there are all these Hollywood movies that are sort of made based of his books, it's sort of somehow I think it might cheapen him in the eyes of literati. So it doesn't add the fact that, oh, this is a high grossing film with Tom Cruise. It doesn't help people like, okay, it's just I don't know. I guess it's fun.
So you're here to give him his due.
Yeah, that I guess that's my at least intention. I don't know if I can succeed with this, but I really think that sort of smart thinking people should read him, and because it is not just again innovative or fun, it is like very, very prophetic. And one of the things, because we started talking about how, you know, us being part of the kind of influencer universe, right? And you do feel a bit not 100% positive about your experience, right? But I see it as this kind of like light beaming through the garbage and the distraction and the noise and kind of like evil messaging. Philip K. Dick actually, I think, is the one who would agree with us 100% because he wrote this book, and that one was never adapted into a movie, even though it was, I think, tried a number of times, but it's very hard. If you read it, you would know. Okay, I have it here. It's called Ubik. Okay, do you see it for those
Yes.
who are on media? Ubik. It is well, it is really a masterpiece. I don't know what to say, but just also for those who are watching this on video, I have actually a tattoo of Ubik on my arm. It is like just a spray, a can spray. Yeah. And what it is this kind of conceptual what Ubik is, and then I maybe can say a few words about the plot of the book, even though like the plot doesn't matter as much. The concept of Ubik is basically, in a way, kind of like God in the bottle, but it doesn't have to be only the spray can. In the book, it's also can be a salve, some sort of it can have different shapes. But what it is that it's the thing that cuts through the kind of the reality or what we consider reality and delivers the true message. Can be in the form of like commercial, it can be, I don't know, it can be in any kind of trashy form. It sort of calls itself Ubik, and it's a bit confusing. I know I'm not maybe like making a lot of sense, but the book is very mysterious and confusing. So it's like I'm kind of just doing it justice. One of the things it also can do while being somewhat like a cutting through the garbage, it also can like sometimes restore reality to some other forms. Like if you spray on it on something, it can heal as well. You know, it's kind of like I guess the usual, almost like Jesus miracles like things. It can be a healer, it can be a restorer, it can also like slightly change time and space. But the biggest thing it can do, and that's what kind of fascinating, that it's sort of, if you listen to it or if you like get caught of that message, it sort of can save you. But it's very hard for anyone to pay attention to it because it can be trashy. It can have any kind of, or doesn't even have, like it usually has the form that is not what we consider like a profound message or not the right wrapper basically on things. So, and I think this concept is, surprisingly and sort of mysteriously prophetic, because that's what, in some ways, let's say you showing up on TikTok.
That's God in a bottle.
Kind of God in a bottle, and it's you sort of like cutting through, and it's surprising. It can be, in a way, it can be subversive, and that's what it's all about. And Ubik is interesting because again, it's very hard to retell the plot because it's like takes place, even though it's written in the 60s, takes place I think in the future, maybe 90s, and the humanity at that point colonized, I think, the Mars and Moon. Hello, like Elon Musk, and it's there. The world is weird. There's like mostly it's like private corporations, which is not unlike now, and for some reason, there are a lot of telepaths that are working for private corporations, partially trying to steal. If you telepath and like a precog, you can sort of like basically have access through your mental abilities to steal other corporation different like insights and secrets basically. And then that's the world of the book. And then in that world, corporations have to hire people who would fight those telepaths in order to the secrets of corporation to remain intact. And it's a really weird world with basically a lot of like psychic stuff going on. And again, I think a book can do it easier than a movie. It's probably harder even to show. That's why it hasn't been successfully adapted. But yeah, so and that's the world, and it's really weird because it's sort of like at the same time taps into this idea that again might come true. I don't know of when a person dies, he can be suspended in eternal half-life by being frozen, cryo basically thing, whatever is almost there. But somehow his mental faculties remain somewhat intact, and the loved one of that person can actually talk to them, or have access to them, to their mind, to their thoughts. And a lot of things, again, that hasn't come true, but definitely people, trying to work towards it. Not the best people, basically Silicon Valley,
Well, and that's the
Silicon
thing is not the best people.
Not the best people,
Is
yeah.
a writer like Philip K. Dick a prophet, a great recognizer of patterns
Hmm.
and consequences in reading the tea leaves? Or is he creating creative worlds that are then self-fulfilling prophecies for the absolute wrong people to take into their hands and emulate? Like, is it
Yeah,
a little
that's.
bit like by
Mhm.
creating the story, he's giving idea to it and people are moving toward that? You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. Like, let's say CERN, not the best people, as I said, very politely, could read those books and be inspired. You mean that,
Yeah,
right?
like everyone's talking about Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and how
Hmm.
she predicted where things would be at in this day and age. And even with a president whose slogan was Make America Great Again, she wrote it in the early 90s.
Yeah.
But it's likely that one of Trump's aides happened to have read that book and taken the wrong message from that book and said, "No, this is actually a great slogan. Let's use it here." It's not like she predicted someone would use the slogan. They found her slogan.
I see what you mean. That's interesting. I
Is he
guess
the
it's not.
IP? Is he the
Mhm.
IP? Is he the source material for them?
It's interesting, and that's what you telling me that like, it's a proven fact, right? That's how they were inspired
No,
by it.
no, no.
It's
It's
not. Okay,
not. It's not. I
it's not.
don't
It's
know I haven't done the deep dive on that. No.
yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, I guess it's not unlike talking about someone like Oppenheimer, right? Sort of a scientist trying to work something out, and hey, atomic bomb. I don't know. That's obviously used only for horrible things. Look, I don't know. I don't. I'm not gonna pretend like I know the answers. My hunch tells me that, let's say, someone like Elon Musk is not getting all his ideas from a stack of 30 books of Philip K. Dick and being like, oh, this is a great idea. We'll do that and that. But at the same time, what do I know? What if he might be a reader? I don't know.
Well,
But
or
there's.
collectively, he's hearing little bits and pieces from
Mhm.
people who have read and, whatever.
I see what you mean, almost like by like osmosis, meaning like he doesn't have to read the book to get the ideas because they are in the air
They're in the
and they
air.
are influential books. But it's interesting. Again, I think it's super interesting thing you pose, and I don't have an answer. I guess my
Yeah,
sort
and
of
sorry,
just
I'm not
hunch.
putting you on
Yeah.
the spot for an answer
No, no, no.
either.
But I don't have an answer. My hunch was like, oh, he is the guy, Philip K. Dick, a really weird like guy with a sort of like antenna open to things, and he's percepting, even if they're dark things. It's not like he wants them, but he's like getting this information and typing it on his typewriter about the world. I don't know, 180 years forward, like before his time. So to me, it's almost like he just had some access. But obviously, it's a bit, I'm like sound almost cuckoo, like
No,
what?
I'm actually more with you. Yeah, I think it's more that.
That's more my reading of it. But at the same time, if we try to be like some sort of pragmatic materialist, it's like, no, he's just like a guy, inventive writer who just wrote this, and then some bad people, bad actors, read it and now trying to implement it. I don't know. That's hard for me to imagine, but who knows? But speaking of actually Elon Musk and the, the bad actors, I have to say, like one of the books, who knows? What if he did read it? But it's hard to take it as positive. It's really dark. It's hard for me to imagine that someone would want it to happen. So there's this book, again, I don't know if you know it, that hasn't been made in a movie, so it's maybe not as famous either, called Three Stigmata of Palma Eldritch. So here it is. I'm just showing it on video. And this is interesting. It's also from the 60s. Again, most of, like, honestly, his best books were written in the 60s, when he was taking a lot of speed. But, and it's sort of, they do read quite speedy, honestly.
Yeah.
But this one is interesting. It takes place in Mars. So there are those colonies, so Earth is partially hard to explain. Maybe it's like not fully good for, to live on. Like there's clearly some kind of like climate problem, and I can't remember exactly what's going on, but it's usually pretty dystopian, Philip K. Dick, future worlds. And people have to live on Mars in pretty harsh, environment, because, Mars is not really conducive to human life as much as, I don't know, Elon Musk wants it to happen. It's really weird. And so actually, like, what's interesting about it is that people there, like, what really is the book about? It's not some kind of technology on Mars. It's just people, like the colonizers who are there. They're very bored, they're depressed, and there's nothing to do. It's harsh. And what they do is, like, they take this drug, Can-D. It's some, like, hard to explain, but basically they take a drug that is also sold to them by a corporation, by the, I guess, the people who sent or forced them to live there, right? To sort of, who colonize Mars. Almost like if Elon Musk would force people to live on Mars, but also will sell you a drug, almost like a one person. And they take this drug, and what it allows them to escape from their very boring and very, like, unexciting, harsh reality into, it's really weird to talk about it, I sound insane, but into living through the dolls, almost like Barbie and Kens, because they have the layout they call Perky Pats. They have these little dolls and the layout and cars and I think little houses, little outfits. And when they take this drug, they somehow manage to trip and imagine, like, that they're those dolls and they live, it's not openly talked about, but it's clear when you read it. They kind of live like a perfect Malibu life. They sort of as if drive by what is it, PH1? What's that highway near Malibu?
Oh yeah,
And they kind of
PCH.
have
Yeah.
yeah, and they kind of have, I don't know, like, they look great. They have some kind of boyfriend. They do fun things, and it really feels just like LA kind of high life when you read it. And but when you read it now, even without knowing anything about LA, you're like, oh my God, this is kind of like internet. Sort
Yes.
of, it's so, and there's obviously, he didn't mean internet. It's like, I don't know, he wrote it and I forgot, mid 60s or late 60s. And it's amazing. It really captures the experience of being online, and you know how a lot of people, especially anonymous one, they can pretend to be anything they want. They can't pretend to be this, like, perfect, I don't know, blonde woman. The Perky Pat, I forgot what's her name exactly. I think, yeah, it's her name is Perky Pat, the main character. And it is kind of weird. And one of the things that happens there, because everyone wants to trip all the time and to play this game, but there's so many of them, they kind of fight for who gonna control the doll, and there's always, like, infights about how they're gonna do it. And I'm not gonna reveal the whole plot, but then the other drug is introduced, and it's like a bad drug, and anyway, and they kind of get addicted to the other thing. But the general premise is weirdly, again, prophetic and also relatable for anyone who is quite online. Let's put it this way.
Yes. No, I mean,
Yeah.
as you're saying that, I'm thinking of people whose faces don't look like their faces in real life, the smoothing filters.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Barbie movie and how that was the only thing that saved cinema, and Ryan Gosling, and how
Yeah.
they're, and it's like kind of a fun thing. I'm thinking of the Kardashians, and so that actually like adds credence to the question I asked you. It is prophetic because he's not touching on specifics. He's speaking to symbols and human inevitabilities warped through the systems in place. And it's fascinating because, yeah, that's like almost biblical for the internet.
Yes, exactly. But then, okay, and that's, I'm gonna convert you. The biblical thing is insane too, because, no, insanely prophetic in a way, because I think basically what happened to Philip K. Dick, and it's, I think, should be known to anyone who even, like, learns to appreciate him, not just as a trashy sci-fi writer, but as like a philosopher and a prophet, is that he kind of at some point, slightly later, I think in his 40s, so when it was mid 70s, started thinking, wait a second, where do I get all this stuff? Kind of what we talk about. There's some of that stuff is weirdly like kind of prophetic for his own life and where the world is moving. And he basically started doubting that he's even writing it himself. He started going somewhat biblical, kind of Jesus freak way of thinking that, wait, no, he's a Messiah. And I mean, that's where it gets fucking weird. I agree. But yeah, and he started having this weird visions of him being actually living in Judea in first century, and he's actually Tom. I mean, he's basically a early Christian, some kind of Jesus follower, and basically, or at least lives in the time of Jesus, and it's led him to this conclusion. I mean, that's only for hardcore, it's called dickhead, like a Philip K. Dick fan, is that actually the empire, that's his phrase, never ended. The
Mm.
empire has never ended. And actually, even that, when he kind of lost his mind, you can say, even that is a bit prophetic because, you know, now people do start to talk about decline of America and how it is a bit like Roman Empire. But he's been onto this again, not in details, maybe details are crazy, but in sort of like spiritual truth of it, long time ago. He's basically was saying at some point and writing this pretty crazy scribbles that were eventually part of it was published as exegesis.
Mm. Wow.
Him trying to figure out what his book's about, where he getting it, kind of like someone going crazy. But his kind of conclusion, even if a bit vague and very repetitive and confusing, was that wait, so it's actually the world that is around us that we inhabit and he inhabited is a bit, it's like not reality or whatever we think reality is all very questionable. It's sort of, he sometimes referred it to as black iron prison. And it's kind of like, again, it's like once I got into that, I somewhat started believing it because we sort of trapped, right? His thing, at least spiritually, how he would explain it, we trapped by this like pretty devious God, which is a very agnostic thing to say, like the God that's like sort of created this and running this universe is not a good God. And whatever good we experience or can have access to is through this beam of light, basically, somewhat of a Ubik thing, right? Like a secret voice and like very kind of quiet things that sometimes manage to disrupt this black iron prison. And in reality, it is like this kind of evil empire that is like violent and makes people subservient and sort of like indoctrinates you into believing into all this bullshit. And isn't it? You know, okay, it's not Roman Empire. He was obsessed with the Rome, that it's still Roman Empire. But on the spiritual level, I guess it's not, doesn't feel as untrue in 2025, you know?
Yeah, totally. I wish I had some arguments to pose. I talk about it's the Zizek line that Mark Fisher parroted in Capitalist Realism, is how it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism. And of course,
Yeah.
I'm on Substack and some idiot is like talking about that line and wrongfully attributing it to Mark Fisher and going, but
Oh,
that's not true. When I do this and this and this and lists all these like seemingly pure experiences, but like neglects to realize those experiences are so tarnished and embedded by what he's calling the empire, that like you don't know what the experience is because the experience is buffered by commoditization. And even if it's not, your processes are as a person because you've walked through it so often. And then I'm just being abstract here. Another line you hear these days is that the Roman Empire never ended, it just became the Catholic Church, right? And just thinking, just adding some more vegetables into this stew of thought. Yeah, it's like I'm totally with that line of thinking. We think that we exist in this vacuum of now, but everything is a series of movements that are in continuation and that have brought us here. And so he lost his mind, but by losing his mind, he was tapping into truths, which is
yes.
unfortunate.
Yes, for sure. And unfortunate, I guess, for him because he sort of like started doubting what is he writing, why is he writing, where he's getting it, which is actually a lot of like writers at some point do wonder where you get all this stuff. I'm talking about, I guess, fiction writers. But it's interesting, you know, like obviously because part of those scribbles were published as this book, The Exegesis of Philip K.
And it's a
Dick.
thick book if you're just
Very
listening to
thick
the
book, but it's
episode.
only maybe like tiny part of it. It's not everything. He has like I don't know, thousands of pages. It really was bizarre. He was like compelled to write it outside of his dominant writing, like that he made money with. It's some kind of was at night or something he was trying to figure out just for him, exegesis, right, to understand what's going on. But the fact that Jonathan Lethem, that I think people, who like reading at least know of Jonathan Lethem, the big writer who I guess was his biggest book, Motherless Brooklyn.
Okay, yeah, I've seen his books all over the place. Never read them.
Yeah. So he is actually one of the editors of the Exegesis because he is one of those dickheads, big Philip K. Dick fans, and he, to some extent, does take him seriously, even those crazy scribblings of his. And because you can't find, as you agree now by even a little bit me telling you about this, there's like so much prophecy in them if you can figure it out. Sometimes it's very convoluted. So yeah, so he is, for instance, he's an editor of this book, and he's frequently actually appears at some kind of Philip K. Dick festivals and readings. So that's gives probably some credibility to this. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that speed in the '60s was so pure. It must have been. The drugs were just so much better back then, weren't they?
Maybe I don't know. You read about cocaine, like
I mean,
even like
thousands of pages as he's also writing his other work. It's just
I
the
have no idea,
output.
but yeah, maybe it is speed. But then it's also, I think, at some point, I think he stopped at some point, and he
Yeah,
still puts out
I'm
because
just
it's not the
joking.
speed that.
No.
Yeah. No, but is there this theory? Have you heard? I don't know if it's all true that in the '60s, speaking of good speed, um, Beatles were their prolific early career is like fueled by some kind of like Nazi remnant speed, or know how true. I don't want to put it out there,
Well, they
but I
were
know
in
that.
they played in Hamburg like all night in strip clubs. They'd play old blues songs that are, not yeah, like they were just playing covers all night long. I believe it, and wars are fought and won by the side that has the most drugs and narcotics to dehumanize their soldiers more than the other side. And so
Yeah.
I wouldn't discount that. So the Beatles on Nazi speed. Well, and I mean, yeah, no, I mean, and that's the whole thing with like the Charles Manson era, how the CIA was testing LSD on
Right.
all these people,
On
and
hippies.
on hippies is like mind
Hmm.
control tactics.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's funny how those substance uses are embedded in these iconic and pivotal both pop culture and political movements.
Kind of. Yeah, that makes you wonder, and obviously it's not like I'm not trying to do drug propaganda, but I really don't think that just by taking any kind of drug you'll reach artistic excellence, unfortunately.
No,
Otherwise, otherwise it would.
no, I got a lot of high school friends who are evidence of that.
Here it is. Yeah, so unfortunately it doesn't guarantee
No,
like
no, and I don't mean to discount everything that he said to the speed. I
hmm
just saw how thick that book was, and I'm like, man,
yeah,
that's a
and
lot
it's
of
not even
writing.
everything.
Yeah, I had to find a way to rationalize why I can't write that much.
Yeah, me too. It's sometimes hard, but
And
maybe
so,
it's like also yeah.
no, sorry, I was seeing you were about to pivot to something before I brought us down into the sewer of drug use.
No, I don't mind. Like Philip K. Dick is one of those maybe the most prolific like speed junkie in a way. So it
Okay.
is like I think it's relevant to because how can you sometimes he would write like okay, this is then like two of those books a year. It's still I
Hmm.
mean it's insane or three. I wanted actually to not to pivot, but because we started talking about kind of Nazi speed, and I think another relevant book by Philip K. Dick that kind of speaks to that is actually one of his more mainstream popular ones, Man in the High Castle, and it was made into TV series, I think, in the last, I don't know, decade. And that was an interesting one because it's sort of like not my favorite. It's almost like too normal and mainstream. And yet it's actually the one I think that I think he got a bunch of awards for it because it was way more, I guess, accessible. But it's fascinating now, again, speaking of living clearly through American decline. I don't know where it's going, but no place good. And what's interesting about it, the book, okay, again, written, I'm just checking, so yeah, 62, so early 60s. And it is an alternative history book. And what's interesting about it, there, it takes place in California, because that's where Philip K. Dick is from. It's usually all California-based books. But it's a California of an outlook of sort of alternative history, meaning that the Nazi and Japanese won the war, not the Allied forces, not like American, Russians, French. So the other side won the war. And what happened is that they kind of colonized the world, divided the world, and the Japanese are the ones who got the, I guess, all this like Western America. And there's Japanese colonial rule, and all the Americans, well, they still live there. I think the blacks are enslaved. There's like dark stuff. I think Chinese are fully some kind of second-rate citizens. There are like horrible things happening. But for sort of like white Americans, it's kind of okay. You just lived under the colonial rule and you have to defer, and the Japanese are the ones who are running things and all the officials and everything. And it's sort of okay. And what's interesting about it is that it captures something really fascinating that I encountered being on the other side, being the kind of like a colony of America, kind of like Russia in the 90s, is that in the book, part of the action takes place in the antique, kind of like antique dealership, antique store. And that store caters to Japanese who like authentic American trinkets because, as that explains it kind of well, when some sort of country or nation, whatever, gets defeated, whatever, their material production does become kind of fetishized.
Yes.
There is connection, I think. And Americans have been doing it to other people for a long time. And that's why this book, written in 62, nothing, peak post-war years, it was kind of fascinating. He really kind of portrayed how somewhat humiliating it is when that stuff is fetishized, which was just pre-war life, and at the same time how this kind of subservience to other people running your land is bizarre, and how one of the characters there is Jewish actually, but he has to hide it, obviously, because the Nazis won, and he's like, it's kind of double shame. Not only he's a shitty American, second-class citizen, he's also a secret Jew. And I don't know, that world, again, it's not even the plot per se, just I don't know, like the character development, the world is really fascinating. I think, again, very timely. And the fact that
Yes.
yeah.
Timely in what sense?
Timely, well, I think there's all this, if you look around, I don't think it's necessarily true, but now there are all these fears about, like, I don't know, China taking over, or there's like, I guess it's part of patriotic warmongering, right? It's not really true, but just generally, if this place goes down, I don't know, maybe its material culture gonna be fetishized by someone. I don't know who is it gonna be. I'm not predicting anything, but that's just something to
Well,
entertain.
I mean, hearing you describe it, to me, it's like an effective inversion of what the United States has done. And you said it was written in 62. So post World War II, US got real high on their horse and really started meddling in everyone through all these really subversive imperialist methods and harder versions. And so, yeah, it's like it's such an effective way of going, hey, actually, the bad guys they also won too. They weren't the Nazis, but they're now, I mean, down to the fact that U.S. intelligence used a lot of Nazi intelligence right after World War II. They gave them jobs.
Operation Paperclip, right?
Yeah.
Is it that? That's wild. And that's actually, I think, just to take where you ended, like to continue your thought, it also makes you, as you read this book, again, fairly light reading, you actually wonder, wait a second, but if it did happen, if Nazis did win, despite all this America thing, is like sometimes, Trump recently tweeted that we won the World War II, and it's like, that's crazy. It's actually Russians who lost more than 20 millions and really kind of like defeated the Nazis, but that's a different conversation. But ultimately, actually, if Nazis won, I'm not sure America would have changed that much. That's what also Philip K. Dick really captured. Yes, unfortunately, some people would be, I don't know, either exterminated or, I don't know, kind of suppressed somehow. But it seems like even Americans themselves, without Nazi winning, like doing this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
They don't need a nudging to do
No, it became more about a fight over economic systems and just wanting to stop the spread of communism, because that would mean they couldn't get their hands into the cookie jar of every territory in the world. And so, yeah, and then the fetishization thing is interesting because, have you seen how like these Trader Joe's canvas bags are like really popular in Japan right now? Which, like,
No.
like my dad, I have a couple that I just have because they were like a
Hmm.
little sturdier, these canvas bags. They've gotten like, there's the Japanese tourists will come over, try to buy as many as they can and sell them for a much higher amount in Japan. And it seems like our junk food sort of basic bitch American culture is already fetishized across the world because it is unique. It's fascinating. It's like how inhumanely set up your average McDonald's is, minus the ones with the play centers. I guess those are kind of friendly. But, the drive through, the big parking lot, the food that's
Sure.
coming from a factory. Um, yeah, it's, and then, I mean, pushing to the Middle East, I'm reading a book called Stone Men about the Palestinians who are they're the builders in even is what we're calling current Israeli society, and how the stones that they've been using for thousands of years weren't in vogue when Israel first occupied. They wanted to use concrete and create their own look of things, but now it has since become a desire for that old world look, and so they immediately rebranded the limestone that's been used to Jerusalem stone, and they've
Hmm.
created fetish. And then down to like the people here wearing turquoise jewelry that they picked up at the native stand. Like, people were buying native jewelry almost right after they finished colonizing in the United States.
Yeah.
And the dream catchers and the feather earrings, and it's looked like the Coachella attire is basically, for years that's what it was. It was like colonial Pocahontas cosplay or whatever. And so,
That's very
yeah,
true.
no, it's
Hmm.
fascinating the symbols and what they mean and how
Yeah.
they're reflective of things and what other cultures take from them
Yeah,
when.
but you know what's interesting? You say how I didn't know about this Japanese trend, and maybe they're the ones who, Japan is very developed on its own. Maybe they are somewhat like fetishizing and almost like laughing at Americans. Maybe I just don't know anything about it, but from my Russian experience, like yes, you can talk differently about it. The American products were fetishized 100%, but not from a position of the winners who are kind of like, oh, here's my feather and I don't know, and little, I don't know what those outfits, and as you say, turquoise earrings. It was different. It was more like a desirable object from a dreamland.
Mm,
Some I think it's a completely different disposition, kind of where you remain inferior, and it is kind of sad that some sort of maybe there was some, I don't know, Coca bag that says Coca-Cola or something like this, or even a can. I'm just trying to think, even from the Soviet times, not just only post-Soviet, because the people were already fetishizing American consumer goods before Soviet Union collapsed. But I think it was a bit sad. That's different. I think when the colonizers, like the winners, do that, that's a like completely different vibe. It was more sort of like almost cannibalistic. You like kill the thing and then pick the corpse. It's
yes.
like, oh, nice ring. Oh, yeah, hell yeah. Put things on yourself. That's somewhat different.
Well, you're right. And so in effect, it's a version of soft colonialism by creating the dreamland, using the media apparatus of films and news and culture, the culture we exported, the
Yeah.
dreamland, and making infecting people with the desire to have a piece of that. Yeah, no,
Sure.
totally. I was running
Sure.
in circles.
Yeah, yeah, no. Well, since you say video doesn't matter, I like move away. I didn't want to talk about it, but maybe just 2 minutes. I
Yeah,
mean, I
let's
bet
do it.
you probably know about it. Speaking of the exported dream, so do you know this book about the beginning of Hollywood called The Empire of Their Own?
No.
No, oh my God. Okay, you'll love it. You from LA, you're the male child actor.
Yes.
I say it lovingly. So it's it's by Neil Gabler, An Empire of Their Own: How the Jews Invented Hollywood. And I have to say, it's a fascinating, pretty like, actually not a dry kind of academic book. It's very engaging. And I'm not going to retell it, but in short, for me, it was fascinating because I was, as we talked on our podcast, I was very much influenced and surrounded by all this like American movies from very early age. And I was very much like completely like affected by them and like sort of made subservient almost. And the thing, this book tells the story of how the kind of like Hollywood, okay, early Hollywood, not maybe the Hollywood that I got to know, but how it was created, who created it, and why it turned out that way. And in short, it's like this: they're all this Jewish, fairly poor, or children of very poor immigrants, or themselves immigrants from former basically Russian Empire or the outskirts of Russian Empire. And they usually moved because of different things: economics, hardships, pogroms, combination of those things. And so they usually moved to New York area, which is kind of known fact. And they were often even like cart pushers. I don't know how to say it. I think those people who like just sell whatever they can, like street sellers. And then basically some of them, or children of those people, it depends, stories vary, or sometimes they themselves manage to go into kind of cheap entertainment, because early cinema, early theaters and everything, they were trash. They were for poor people. They were, at least, yeah, actually for poor people, very low, low middle class or poor. It wasn't fancy. And so people who got into the business were themselves like, the riffraff, so to speak. And then, to cut the story short, they're the same people who moved to the West Coast because it was actually less discrimination, Wild West, everything was open. And they were the original kind of creators, like studio heads, like they created those studios. And even outside of that story that the book tells much better than I do, because it's been a while, it's been a few years since I read it actually. And what it tells is this: if you think of them as complete outsiders, immigrants from like this kind of sad, forlorn land, and definitely they themselves came, otherwise they wouldn't move, from pretty like they like struggling circumstances, and they moved here and they succeeded. And they kind of created, even though they often there was anti-Semitism and they were excluded often from different country clubs, from like high society, but they created this kind of world. In a way, they created the America that's been projected everywhere in the world through Hollywood. That's like not the America they actually experienced, but it's the America, the author argues, that they wanted to be. Like they kind of like their dream of America in a way. Do that make sense? And
Yeah.
that's fascinating, because it makes total sense that it's that way. But it wasn't like intentional evil thing, some kind of colonial project that's like supposed to enslave everyone in their head and make them believe that America is the best place on earth. It's almost for themselves. It's actually a very touching story. Most of them, they kind of, they believed it. They're like this kind of very kind of like talented, industrious Jews who are just kind of self-made man, all of them, the original creators. And they sort of created this dream almost for themselves to watch and to sort of project. And it wasn't real, and it's still not real. But those are the people who created it, not the waspy, some kind of like white wasps that often later took over. It kind of finishes on a sad note, because frequently, all the studios and everything were taken from them, and it was often later run by more, I don't know, proper people or some sort of like managerial class. But yeah.
Fascinating. You blaze the trail of desire west, and then the bankers follow after that. Or the old guard follows after you've blazed the trail. Yeah, so it sounds like it was sprouted out of desire and fantasy. But with that, it then got co-opted into what the American desire, the impetus of the agenda here. But yeah, that sounds like a much more pure and like almost wholesome story in a way, or triumphant story.
Definitely. Yeah. And also like it sort of humanizes the industry, because you can be critical of even the origin. What is this? Or some people can be also just anti-Semitic, Kanye or whoever, right? Kanye said that. Not, I guess, totally untrue. Jews do run a lot of things, but not always. There are a lot of, it's not true anymore. They just created it. And the book really, I think,
I mean,
gets
those are my, I think I've told you, those are my people. My grandfather came over on a boat in 1901. My grandfather, because I had an old dad, and he was old when he had my dad, from Russia, Russian Jews. And so, I mean, I feel that impulse, that impulse to create a better life. It's there, and often through fantasy, because this other world, this real world, is too immovably large and already has an agenda that's way too hard packed.
exactly.
Yeah, that's really
There's like
cool.
a lot of dreaming, kind of daydreaming involved in this, even if you have to be industrious and sometimes cutthroat. It is kind of fascinating. It obviously makes sense that you would come from some version of like hardship and otherness almost, because you the other. Why else would you do it? And that explains, by the way, there's a lot of criticism of it, but it makes total sense. Most of the early, and still to some extent, like female stars and everything, they were definitely not Jewish. Jews were running it and creating this dream scenarios because that's was nice to dream about. While maybe I don't know, at home your Jewish wife yells at you. I don't know.
No, that's right. That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
but it's funny, yeah. So that's definitely kind of I think a timely read too. For
Yeah,
Evgenia.
cool. Thanks for pulling that one. I gotta read it, and I gotta return back to a little bit of innocence, a little bit of belief in the
Hmm.
goodness of, not the goodness, just the industriousness of people who radically imagine a way to, get by.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because I myself, like, it's been again, maybe I got some details wrong. It's been a few years since I read it, and it's one of the things, only when you put it this way, oh, it's actually kind of good to be a bit naive and kind of believing in something better and creating a dream that maybe can improve the life as well, right? Because it's good to look at something kind of positive. Why not?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be all negative? Like, there is something good and pure about it, and it's kind of somewhat forgotten. It is sort of like lost. I don't think Hollywood is not really that. And it's probably good to, I don't know if it to keep it going, like version of this. I
Yeah.
don't know, because media is powerful, right? It's part of media, and
It is, and when you see a movie, it moves you like a good movie. And I don't know how it was even allowed to get made, but it was. And you watch a
Mhm.
movie like Parasite, and like you're changed.
I
You leave.
know, I know. It is interesting. It is like sometimes forget because at this point I rarely can watch new movies. They're not that great, and I can't watch TV because mostly it seems like all the creative forces are thrown into TV because I don't know, there's money, I don't know, and I can't watch that. It all seems the same, like sort of polished picture, the same rhythm, like it's all the same, some kind of same drama in different costumes and different, like it's not interesting. But when you do watch a good movie, it just like it touches you so profoundly. I watched recently The Apprentice. I have to say I was shocked. It's a Trump movie. It's a movie about
Oh, no kidding.
Trump early days. You'll be shocked. And I was like, as I was watching, I was like, wait, who made this? This is not American. I'm like, and I was right. It's made by an Iranian, truly Iranian filmmaker who I think he's like, got Iranian Danish. I think he studied in Denmark in film school. He's has nothing to do with America. It's like an outsider look, and it's fantastic film. So, but anyway, so it still can happen to me, and I was
Yes,
very touched.
that's the
I was just
best.
like,
I'm watching The Sopranos right now, and it's similar. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, it has so many layers to it.
yeah,
But also, I think what you just said about the Iranian Danish filmmaker making the Trump
hmm,
movie is
yeah,
why what I thought when you first brought up Philip K. Dick and you were like an outsider, you were a self-proclaimed outsider talking about it,
yeah.
and it's like, no, that's the purest form sometimes because you're bringing a different angle onto things. And so I'm really appreciative. And yeah, I feel like you gave us so much fertile terrain through walking us through those.
Yeah, can I add a few more things about Philip K.
Please.
Dick? That was my main focus, and maybe I'll talk about one of his books that definitely people know because Blade Runner movie based on it. But in short, okay, I'm just trying to refocus why Philip K. Dick feels so profound to me, especially now in my middle age. Is this again? Most of his books are sci-fi. There's only like a few traditional novels, and they were never successful in. But those sci-fi books actually, if you read them, okay, disregard Mars or whatever, like they're like weird locales. Actually, it's just suburban California, suburban America. For him, it's California where he lived, so you would know it really well to some extent, the
Yes.
vibe of it. And he really captures this sort of like suburban family existence, the cars, the sort of house, the paranoia. It's another thing because I've been in a somewhat suburb only for a few years, and it's been like the most revealing 2 years of my life in America. Because urban where we lived, like Venice and LA or New York, some like that's not that. That's what gives you some real insight into American psyche. And it seems like some things that I've been writing resonated with people, and sometimes they would or I would get a lot of hate because they would think I would be some snotty anti-American, and I'm not. I'm actually compassionate, and I'm in it right now. But basically, Philip K. Dick is all about it. It's actually just like family life. Often there's like a married couple or recently divorced, or there's some like horrors of suburban marriage. It's again not called suburban because it's all fantastical dystopian future, but you can tell. You just strip that down. It's a realistic, dramatic novel, just like Revolutionary Road, but better. And I think that's what also captivating for me and for anyone who is like, oh, sci-fi, I don't like it. No, it's not that. It's actually is the most relatable thing you can read. And I do have to talk about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Because I reread it a number of times, and that's like one of those books that's so simple but really speaks to you. And one thing that outraged me, because obviously I watched Blade Runner years ago, and it's huge in Russia, it's huge over the world, and people are like, oh, Ridley Scott, what a genius, look at that film. And I have to say, after acquiring really like a taste for Philip K. Dick, oh my God, he got him wrong. There are some elements that are there, but the fact that he didn't get the central theme of that book, it's barely there, and a lot of like the essential scenes are not there. It makes me think he's kind of an idiot, and maybe it's anathema, like it's, I guess, a crime to say that. But truly, if you read the book, you would know. So why would he decide not to include it? So the actual premise of the book, yes, there's a dystopian world. There's like a bounty hunter. There are androids and humans and all that. Okay, people know the film, but the central thing, really, that the book spends so much time on, that people live in this dystopian world where all the animals, because of irradiation, died, and very few alive, like live animals exist, and they're like a very valued possession, like extremely valued. And partially it's not some kind of, yes, it's a status symbol too, symbol too, if you own like a sheep or a live cat or a dog, yes, but it's also is just connected to the fact that you can hang out with your live animal, because nothing is alive. Like there's no spiders, like literally there's no life. The way like I look around and see some, I don't know, sparrow hopping, no, none. There's everything is dead. And so and this is the landscape we're moving first of all towards, and he captured what it would be like and how hard it is to be without animals, how depressing it is, and how valued they become. And that element is not really in the film. Yes, there's like, is it fake? Is it not? Oh, it's a fake sheep, or they lying. But ultimately, it really captures also well how people still want to have an animal, and that's why they would get a cheap, android, kind of like manufactured knockoff of an animal, just to kind of like experience some sort of relationship with a pet, not just as to show your status to the neighbors, but mostly even to have any kind of relationship. They're even ready for that to be android. And that's really fascinating. And another big thing, and I think it's not fully in the movie really, or not a big focus, is that it really shows that in that kind of dystopian world, what really matters is actually empathy. Because ultimately one of the characters, not the bounty hunter, but the sort of, can you say, like mentally, I guess, not fully there, disabled person that basically, because of the radiation, is the kindest, sort of empathetic character of the book in a way. He's just a kind of like basically dumb human, and they're in that world, kind of those people who are like damaged are considered, yeah, literally like he's a retard, like factually, I can say it. And yet Philip K. Dick really gets at the thing. His empathy and his kindness makes him like a better human than most, and obviously superior to androids who never, despite all their high intelligence, like that's one of the point of the book, they can't have, right, the empathy. That's part of the test. That's how to see that someone is an android. They don't have the empathy, and sometimes they can't even fake it. They want to fake it, but they're not, like, they can't fake it enough, and so you can catch them. And so I think this is like, again, should be like a central book of today, because think about the conversation about what is empathy and what is it, why does it even matter? Isn't it all about the smarts and not? And the character, the basically mentally a disabled guy, is so kind, and he finds, for instance, a spider that shouldn't even exist, but sometimes some animals survive there, and he finds it, and instead of like selling it for a lot of money, because you can always, in that world all the animals are extremely valuable, I think he just wants him to live, and he lets him go. There's like a lot of things that are like stayed with me, that I think are essential, again, to sort of focus right now, and not on the sexy android and their love story the way it's done in the movie. So So anyway, that's my spiel, and I think it is a fascinating book. And it also, the fact that Ridley Scott, sorry that I'm on a rant, but really, like the opening scene of the book is like, yeah, that's the one. So the married couple like arguing, have like a crazy and really fun marital argument in the bed early in the morning. And the fact that it's not in the book, and the fact that the guy doesn't have a wife, the main character, Rick Deckard, is like, I mean, what is he even thinking? Ridley Scott is like, doesn't know what he's doing, I think. In terms of Philip K. Dick adaptation, maybe it's as a separate film, let it live. And so, yeah, and it is fantastic and so relevant, and they're fighting, and since it's future, they don't need to take different pills the way we do now to feel better, to be up, to be down, to be relaxed. They have some kind of thing they dial on. And the whole argument there that the wife threatens, just out of spite for her husband, the main character, threatens to dial, I still remember it, something like 6 hours of self-accusatory depression just to spite him. And you can do it. Or you can do like happy, like basically all the pills people take or the supplements, that's clearly all around us. At that point in the book, I mean, it's a bit futuristic, obviously, they kind of exist as like a, I don't know, like almost like a phone that somehow affects you and connected to you, and you can just press like, oh, bliss, marital bliss, or like, oh, yeah, and all that. And it's fantastic. How is it not in the film? And again, Philip K. Dick often really good about marriage and family. And even if it's a bit depressing, he gets it.
Yeah, I mean, even down to the absence or presence of having a pet. It's like in that little domestic fairy tale, you have the golden retriever there, the man's best friend, they call him. It almost makes me think that, like, the average suburban American existence is in and of itself a tale of science fiction. And
Yes, that's what yes, it's like Mars. It's already living on Mars. You
it's
don't
already
like
just
it's
without heightening any of it. It's just like wildly strange. It is
it is.
the Jetsons cartoon, but now you have a microwave and yeah, the setup is totally unnatural. And yeah, without that dog or the companionship of animals, man. I mean, my dog's been falling in love with this black stray cat. He's a little white poodle, and this little black stray cat's been in our yard. And it's been like the highlight of my week, seeing him and this cat interact. And,
Yeah.
we we want the stray cat to become our cat if we can. And yeah, I mean, just
It gives you so much joy, right?
so
You and your
much
wife.
joy. Yeah.
Cost nothing while they are alive. In the world where animals are not anymore, it's like depressing as hell.
So depressing. And yeah, what an impactful symbol. And yeah, entertainment is going to entertain. Entertainment does not always thrive on empathy. Sometimes it uses exaggerated versions of empathy to create an artificial feeling, but or no, maybe a real feeling, but through artificial means. But yeah, it that makes me want to read it because it reminds me that I have read the first 20 pages of that book because my wife really likes it too.
Hmm.
And so I got to get into this Philip K. Dick.
He
Not
has
that
it.
not that you were
I bet
here to sell me on it, but I'm sold.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bet your wife partially also likes it. I think it has a fantastic kind of semi-depressed, a resentful housewife character in it, which is, I mean, it's not I don't know, it's not misogynistic. It is fantastic. Who like hooked on day TV, and the day TV there is surreal. Is like, but it is surreal as it is. It's just
It
more surreal in the
it is
book.
surreal as it is. And talking about dialing up the feelings, that is what we do when we go into Instagram. I guess mine is I want to feel shitty because all I see are children being burned alive in Gaza. But
Me too. I like. Yeah.
other people are seeing yeah, nothing but like feel good scrolling for
But
hours.
it's never feel good.
No, it
It makes you
doesn't.
jealous. It's known. Okay, you look at the great stuff, not the children burning, and you still don't feel good because you're jealous of the life that's not even real. So I mean, it's like the
But it
known
does
fact.
eat away at your time. It pacifies the time,
For sure, for sure.
and that's
So it's really dark, and it's very, just to insist, it's very Philip K. Dickian, that existence scroll Instagram been hooked into something that's virtual yet super powerful. Like the power of this thing cannot be disregarded. And at some point, Yasha more so because he's been in journalism and like in online kind of writing for a long time, and he had such a crisis because of it. Because you think like it is evil, I should just stop, be like a baker, or But then one of the things I think that's my message, if there is any, no, you can't, because yes, the feel like your hunch is correct. But if you just log out, okay, maybe your life, if you can afford to live, upstate on a farm and sustain yourself, maybe it's gonna be like it's gonna get better, the quality of your life. But I think it's kind of important if you have the facility and some sort of like some talent with words or anything to like combat it somehow a little bit. I think I'm not being again like I'm actually not joking. It's not just for the money or some fame. It's more like, no, you can't just allow them to run it and log
Yes.
out. Don't you think?
Yes, it's a war of ideas. It's a war of information. Information is
Yeah.
currency, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing how information is dangerous and creative ideas are dangerous. And yeah, no, it's everything, and it's what compels me to keep running my mouth. It's like no, 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 because otherwise the other voices will just keep coming. Like, and those voices don't want what's best for you.
No.
And
No.
not to say my message is pure or your message is pure, but you know, if you're well intended, like that needs to come out, whether
But
it's
it
through so
matters. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think it matters.
Yeah, and that's the thing. One of the debilitating thing, I mean, Yash experienced it more than me because I wasn't that present anywhere, and like he has kind of like I don't know, decade plus of a career, but I can experience it to some extent as well by osmosis. Is that if you kind of stop believing in it and see commodification only of the things, even the well-intended ideas, right? Let's say I look at you and it's like, oh, he just wants to be TikTok famous, or say, oh, he's saying all these things or writing those things or me like just I don't know for clout or I don't know like all this and I guess there's some element of it like all our motivations are mixed. We want to be respected and I don't know not adored but kind of like I don't know like our ideas matter and I matter and it's all there some aspect of it. But if you allow yourself to be convinced that it's all just bullshit commodification of everything and it's all just for cloud and none of the ideas matter more than the other. It's just you just trying to hoard subscribers or the eyeballs. If you just allow yourself to be demoralized to that extent, it's just over. They're gonna win. And I think truly like that's a new discovery for me and it got me a bit out of depressive state. It's like no, it matters. So there's that. And you know what? Just before I think you'll want to get rid of me, I have to say, like, actually, I completely forgot. The only really good adaptation and how to say, like, I guess accurate in the spirit adaptation of Philip K. Dick work, just a short story, not even a novel, was done by another foreign filmmaker, immigrant, no, not an immigrant. He's just a foreign filmmaker. He's back home, Paul Verhoeven, the Dutch filmmaker.
Mm.
You probably know him, right? So he made Total Recall, which is a huge movie, like, I don't know, like very expensive mainstream Hollywood film. But I think it's extremely subversive. And it is adaptation, a very funny and very accurate and very dystopian and subversive and politically questionable and philosophical, actually. What is reality? What is not? Who are we? What's the core of yourself? That's Total Recall. And it's funny because Arnold Schwarzenegger is in it, who usually, again, people think, oh, it just I don't know, Hollywood flick, and it is fantastic, and it took me some time to appreciate it, but it is a fantastic film and a very true adaptation of Philip K. Dick, and again, it takes place partially on Mars, and the people who run Mars in the book are evil. It's a kind of Elon Musk character. It's funny, also very, you can say, prophetic because it was written in the 60s. And well, the movie was made in the 90s. And I think the other guy who didn't do direct adaptation because I guess you have to buy the rights and spend a lot of money and his productions never have that much money is David Cronenberg, which I bet you at least you probably know. It's again late 90s movie Existence. Have
Never
you heard
seen
of
it.
it?
No.
Oh my God, I'll send it to you. I think it is fantastic. Or you can just look it up because it is to some extent there's even signs of it like Perky Pad little bag. Like it is kind of a spiritual adaptation of different Philip K. Dick novels, even though it's an original screenplay. And it really captures this also like virtual existence because in the film people play this computer game, but computer games at that point, because it's the future, developed to an extent that you hook them. They're kind of bio computer games. You hook them into your spinal cord and the base of your spine, and so it's very real. And then there's a fight between the people who want to be hooked on it and those who want to destroy virtual reality and kind of like some would like kill the bubble that pacifies you and makes your life kind of manageable because you hooked into this, but ultimately very like passive and powerless. Anyway, very Philip K. Dick. And so I guess those two movies very I don't know, to add on a Hollywood note, they're kind of fantastic how to call it, also like artifacts of the fact that Hollywood can be sublime, or I don't know, movies generally be sublime, not just Hollywood. And to me, it's like, and the times when I stopped believing in all of this, I try to remember like the good things,
I love that. And that's so compelling. You've given us a lot of homework because this seems worthy, and just a fascinating look. I don't even need to go read the books. Even just you've aligned with the premise of this show. It's just hearing you talk about it, I feel richer for the experience.
Well, I think though you will.
No, I'll read the books. I'll read the books.
Yeah. Or some of them at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. I don't know. Do you think we covered?
I think we did. I'm so grateful to have you on. I just really love listening to you, and I think I'm a dickhead in waiting. Yeah.
Well, it might happen to you. Just will click one day, and then you'll start doing tattoos on yourself like me, and you'll be like, oh my God. Like, I sometimes use this book just to, well, I don't care if people think I'm cuckoo. Who cares? So this book, The Crazy Ramblings, Sexy Jesus, not always, but it just lives by my bed or in the office. And it's sort of like, I kind of like opening it anywhere because it's kind of, you shouldn't read it like linearly. It's impossible anyway. And almost use it as like, I guess some Christians use the Bible.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like, soothing one-page read, and it's like, oh yes, like those are wise words to live by. And I'm like, oh, this is some insane shit, like to live and true. And so, and it usually cheers me up, honestly. Some of it is like out there, and some of it is very matter of fact and I think, relatable.
Yeah. That's it helps you locate yourself, and it takes a little bit of madness to do that sometimes if we're being honest. But yeah, also I just want to say a really inspiring conversation, and I feel like it's.
Thank you for allowing me to send my God in a bottle message.
But no, a pleasure, and thank you for sharing it. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going. And I just can't thank you enough for being on the podcast.
I don't know, thank you. It's like that was very fun. Yeah, and when you're in New York, let's try to always hang out.
Yeah, let's do it. I would love that. Evgenia Kovda, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into Turek Books, and happy reading out there. You just got some more titles added to the pile, so good luck with that.
No pasaran. Don't allow the assholes to kind of ruin your life,
Amen.
Amen, yeah.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of Turek Books. If you can remember to rate the podcast on whichever platform you're listening on, it's a big help. Tell your friends, share it, and come to my comedy shows. Check my website, joshuaturek.com. We'll be seeing you soon with another episode and plenty of books.